Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Season 5 of On the Road With. This is a show where we talk to touring professionals from the entertainment and performing arts industries. My name's Gareth and I'm your host. You can check out all the previous seasons of the show wherever you get your podcast fix. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave us a review. That really does help spread the word of the show and create a bigger audience for us. You can also stream all the available music from the show, all the tracks that me and my guests have picked on the On the Road With Songs playlist on Spotify. Now, my guest today is somebody I've wanted to get on the show for a very long time. It's comedian, magician and founder of Focused Creatives, Mr. Tom Elliott. So before we go into Tom's interview, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you that tuned into last week's episode and the previous weeks as well. They had especially high numbers. Last week, with John Terrell's episode, we actually got the most listens on an episode to date of On the Road With, which was really satisfying for me. We also passed the 2,000 listens mark as well. So I'm really pleased with that. There's been some lovely reviews coming as well. I will be reading those out at the end of the show. And they really do mean the world to me. It's a lot of time and effort putting this together. I really do enjoy it, but it's made that even more satisfying when you hear from people how much they've enjoyed it as well. So I really do appreciate that. On to today's guest then, Mr. Tom Elliott. He's a lovely guy, really good to work with. I'm part of the Focused Creative community myself. I'm a recent member of that. I joined that, when was it, about a month ago. And it's really helped me, what it says on the tin really, give you that clarity, confidence and community that kind of push you along, especially at the minute in these really tough times. Tough for everybody, of course, but for our sector, for the performing arts, creative and entertainment sectors, it's really tough with a lot of our work being wiped out, and we've had to kind of look at in other directions for work and projects and what we can do. Tom's been a big part of helping me with that, so I thought I really want to get him on the show. We talk about everything from his brand of comedy and magic and the importance of finding your own voice as a comedian, the importance of meeting your heroes and spending some time with them, and some different experiences and some interesting stories about when he's done that and he spent time with some big names in comedy that you definitely would have heard of and seen on the TV. We also talk about the Focused Creative community itself and how that came about, and how the lockdown circumstances and the financial help from the government enabled him to do that. And we predict what 2022 might look like and what things might look like post-COVID as well in terms of the theatre market, which we're both in, and loads and loads of other things as well. There's no music on this episode as Tom isn't a music guest as such. He's not a singer or musician, but I have included a little treat for you at the end of the show. I have included a track which I hope you're really going to like. So without further ado, please sit back, grab yourself a cup of tea and enjoy my conversation with Tom Elliott. Tom, thanks so much for doing this.
My pleasure, Gareth. Thank you for having me.
So, yeah, no, it's good. It's been good to link up with you recently and get involved in your Focused Creative community. And we talk quite regularly now, don't we?
We do. I mean, what else is there to do during lockdown other than find someone to talk to? But
well, that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it. And I just wanted to start really, like I said before we started recording, I'm going to split the interview into two parts. So let's look at your comedy and magic side first. I was thinking about this last night. How do I approach it? When I think comedy and magic combined, I think Tommy Cooper. That's just straight away what comes into my head. I'm a big fan of people who can combine more than one discipline. I've had a lot of them on the podcast. You know, that's a big part of the podcast is featuring guests like that. So talk to us about how the combining of the two works and how did that come about? Which were you first and all that? You know, were you magician first or comedian first? How did it all come together?
Sure. I mean, Tommy Cooper is the best example because people have heard of him and they identify him with that kind of comedy and magic. Yeah. However, Tommy Cooper is a man of his own, and it's important to say that my act isn't like Tommy Cooper, and I would never try to be.
You're not a tribute.
Anyway. I'm not a tribute act, no. So I think for me, the drive of it is the comedy. I guess I like people. I like being with people. All the comedy comes from having people on stage, interacting with people. However, the magic was the thing that came first. When I was in secondary school, kind of early years of secondary school, I must have been about kind of 14. A mate of mine said, "Do you want to do? Should we get involved?" He was doing magic at the time. I was actually learning ventriloquism. I don't do that anymore, but at the time, that's what I was doing. We did kids' parties for ages. He then got a proper job and I decided to carry on the comedy and the magic thing. I ditched the kids' parties, but I kind of went in the comedy route and loved it. And so it went from there really, and it's just grown over time. And yeah, love it.
Oh, cool. So I mean, if you look at how the two kind of fit together, like you say, Tommy Cooper is the best example because he was so well known and so genius. I think he was
Absolutely.
unbelievable. He's such a clever guy, and it was so sad how he passed on stage. It's on YouTube actually, isn't it? The footage of him actually dying on stage, and everyone thought it was part of the act, and it's really quite chilling to watch.
You know, I'd love to go like that though. I mean, what a way for that guy to go. I mean,
True.
I know that off stage, if you know the story of Tommy Cooper, off stage he was a bit of a broken man in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what a way to go if you're a man who loves the arts, a man who loves comedy and the stage, and what a way to go.
Yeah, true. If you're a performer, there isn't many better ways to go really. So you just mentioned ventriloquism there. Um, I always think that's a difficult thing when it comes to any discipline really. If you look at mine, it's like how do I narrow down from I was a trumpet player first, but then I'm a songwriter, singer. There's a lot going on. And I guess it's the same in the magic world as well. There's magic, but then there's so many different subdivisions. I mean,
Sure.
I know people who specialise in hypnotism, people who are close-up magicians. Where do you kind of see your specialism lying?
So the ventriloquism kind of dropped off, I
Yeah,
guess,
that
as
was
I
just a thing to
explored
get you into
comedy.
it, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think as the more I went into comedy, you have to find your voice and what kind of thing gets the most laughs. For instance, I'm not a stand-up, so I don't tell funny stories. Quite often when I do interviews like this, sometimes people say, "Oh, tell us a joke," and
Oh
I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh, I don't. It's not really jokes. I don't do story. I'm not Russell Howard or anything like that. But the interaction of people is where the comedy comes from, and magic was just enabled me at that time as I was starting out. Magic gave me a little bit more leeway to explore those avenues and find where my laughs came from, I guess. And I just love having people on stage and doing funny things, and them being the star of the show in many ways. They get a lot of the laughs, and so the ventriloquism dropped, but it was a bit of a pathway to finding my niche as a comedian.
yeah. That makes sense. And I think every comedian, comedy is a discipline. I could talk to you all day about it. It's a discipline that really fascinates me, as does magic. So you're an ideal guest in both those ways because you do both. And I think not just every magician, but every comedian, even the stand-ups, have their own little niche. I've watched a couple of programs recently. One was on Michael McIntyre and one was on Mickey Flanagan, and it was interesting. They come across as a similar type of comedian, observational
Sure.
in a broad sense. They are, but they've got very different niches that they tap into, if that makes sense, in terms of their
Yeah,
style and their delivery.
and it comes naturally. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of years to spend a little bit of time here and there with Milton Jones. And
Yes,
sorry
yeah,
to name, I'll just pick that name up.
yeah,
There we go. I just picked it up. I've had a little bit of time with Milton. I was able to get a coffee with him kind of December 2018, and we've kind of just kept in touch a little bit. And I've been to see him and kept in touch and learned from him. And just it's just and he says that his style came about largely by accident. He said he was so desperate to get the laughs when he was starting out that his jokes just got shorter and shorter because he couldn't bear the silence of laughter between the gags. So in the end, that became a one-liner comedian because he was just desperate to get to the next laugh.
Well, that's what he is. Yeah, he's one of those who. He was on a show that we watched at Christmas, actually, not this Christmas, Christmas before. He was on like a live at the Apollo or something like that, and I was watching it with my family. And the comedian on before him was an Australian guy whose name escapes me, but he was really loud in your long hair, really loud in your
Sure.
face, and really funny. Then they put Milton Jones on. It's quite a risk because he's completely different. And at the start, you do think, and I'm sure he'd say this himself, or you'd probably know if he'd say this. You do think, okay, bit of a weirdo. Like, what's he doing? And then, like after 4 or 5 gags, you actually think this guy is really funny. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, and you know, it looks so natural, but I, having spoken to him, he just the amount of effort and the work that goes in is unbelievable. And so he even has 8 grades of Milton. So that, like he says, the the thicker the crowd, or the newer the crowd are to him, the higher the hair. So
Oh,
and
right.
so that fascinates me, and just the detail in which he kind of works that act and builds it is phenomenal.
I mean, I remember my father-in-law said to me, he said, "Oh, not an easy job for you, going to me." He said, "Going out and singing, with a big band behind you, and you've got to remember your lyrics, and what if you have an off night and all this." I said, "Yeah, but stand-up comedians, I'd take my hat off to them. That is not an easy
Oh
gig."
yeah, me too. Because I always say, if I'm not funny, then it's just magic. So
Yeah,
just a bit of a get out clause, but no, comedy, it's a bit like it's a bit like learning to play an instrument, except that you do it all in public, and so you learn
yeah,
to
yeah,
fail in public, and
yeah.
you die on stage in public. um but it's a craft that you learn and develop over time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I think is definitely the case. Other comedians I've had on here have talked about their stories of exactly that, dying on stage and stuff. And you do have that as a musician to a certain extent. You have the gigs you do to two people and stuff like that. But with musicians, I've seen singers, for example, hit a really flat note at the end of a song, and people still politely applaud, like, "Okay, well, at least they tried," sort of thing. Whereas with
Yeah,
comedians, if you're not funny, that's it. You just won't. If the audience don't find it funny, you just won't get it. And I remember, I've got a friend of mine who's a singer and a comedian, and it was something I thought about doing because they've got. Have you heard of Ultra Comedy? They do these events.
oh no, I have to say.
Yeah, so they do these events to raise money for charity of your choice, and you train up to be a stand-up comedian to do a 10-minute set, and then you do this set, and you get people sponsor you to do it.
Nice.
And a lot of comedians in Leicester certainly they've become comedians professionally or semi-professionally through doing that. And I thought about doing it myself. Then I saw my one of my friends' performances, Lauren, and I said to her, because she's a singer as well, and I said, you know what? What didn't occur to me was if I'm a singer, well, I'm a singer. If I'm in front of a band and I make and I do tell the odd little gag in between songs or a little bit of banter. If it goes down like a lead balloon, I can turn around to my drummer and just nod at him, and he goes, "Yep, 1, 2, 3, 4," and we're into the next song. So the
Yeah,
awkwardness is
absolutely.
instantly gone. But if you've got a 15, 20-minute set, even that short, and it sounds short, but they can be a long 15 minutes. If a gag don't go down well, it's recovery, isn't it? It's really, really hard. I don't know if you've ever been in that position of sort of trying to get
Yeah,
your way out of a
absolutely.
hole.
And the thing is, what you come to realize is you can do exactly the same set in exactly the same way, and one night it can get raucous laughter. You could be applauded off the stage, people cheering, and the next night it could fall flat on its face, and it could be the worst gig of your life. And so, but you've done it exactly the same way, exactly the same material. It's just people. It's part of the atmosphere. It's partly the kind of comedic nature of the people.
Yeah,
Tom, who is it? Ken Dodd used to have a giggle map, and he used to record which jokes worked in which parts of the country. And so up north, they love a bit of banter. They love that
yeah.
slightly offensive engagement. Um, Whereas down south, they're not really into that as much, but they love the one-liners. They love all of that stuff. So different types of comedy work well in different places, and you learn just to get on with it and enjoy what it is.
Absolutely. And so, looking at your diary in a normal year, then, do you do? I know it's hard to remember.
Torn this year's diary up, Gareth. I don't even know where it is.
Do you do much kind of corporate magic work and private bookings and that sort of thing, or is it all combining the two, comedy and magic? Because I know comedians do some corporate gigs as well, don't they?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I haven't really broken it. I've done one or two very low-scale corporate stuff. I mainly do. It's a whole mix, really. I do I do a lot of. I do some theatres. I do some comedy clubs. I do some churches, even, and I do some schools. So it's a whole blend of mixed stuff, really, a mixed bag. And each of them have a different kind of flavour to it. And so yeah, all over the place, all over the country, in all kinds of different places.
And of course, I guess going into schools, how do you shape that show to make it right for a school? Is it a kind of workshop atmosphere where you're getting them into groups and involved, or is it just they sit and watch you do a show, or how does that work?
It varies from time to time. So the other kind of a side passion that I have really is kind of well-being and helping people to live well.
Yeah,
And so they kind of that's the angle that we go in, or I go in terms of schools, is that it's kind of a comedy. It's kind of an illustrated session on well-being, but with magic and comedy brought in. So it's like an extended glorified assembly, I guess, with a theme on well-being.
Okay, interesting. And you actually on our when we were doing the Voxer stuff the other day, that was the big thing that came out of it for me, ideas wise, was like because I'm an educator myself, I teach all the time, and obviously I'm like you, I want to be breaking into theatres. And I just went out and said to the missus after being in here for doing some work, I said, I can't believe I didn't think of this. Do a schools workshop when you're at a theatre. Do a local schools workshop in the daytime. I thought
Great
that's
idea.
that so suits my skill set as well. Like I could pull that together like that, and I can't believe I
Yeah.
didn't think of it. But sometimes, and this is where we're getting onto focus creative, I guess, is sometimes you just need that other person to go to kind of push you in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we look at the focus creative stuff, then obviously it's quite a rapidly growing community, and that all came about due to this kind of time we're in where theatres are closed. A lot of them, I know I'm looking on social media and seeing a lot of the theatres that I work with crowdfunder campaigns and things like that, which is never good. You look at that and you think, So before we get onto the focus creative side, how do you think the recovery is going to look for the arts? Do you think we'll have a kind of, some people are predicting a roaring 20s after all this is gone because people are just going to want to go mad?
Yeah, do you know, I don't know what next year will look like. I'm very aware that kind of theatres, some theatres are really battling, they're closing, others have had a lot of support. I think probably some of the big ones might struggle because their overheads are huge.
Yeah.
And some of the smaller theatres may just pull through because they're the smaller kind of 300 seat kind of theatres. They're normally quite well supported locally. They've got a bit of a kind of fan base from their local community. Maybe they're council led. I don't know. But some of them might survive. But I think the thing that I will see is that I think in 2022, particularly, it's going to be tour crazy. Like every single artist on the planet is going to be doing a massive tour
Yeah.
because everyone's just going to try and make up for this year, aren't they? And so if you're feeling a bit bored in 2022, there's probably a tour that you can go and watch.
Yeah.
Just make sure you ignore all of them and come to mine.
Yeah, that's it. It's I mean, what's been quite saddening for me, and I'm sure a lot of other creatives, is we kind of thought, right, there was that whole thing at Christmas, right, bye bye 2020. There was all these memes on social media, like, bye bye 2020. Thanks a lot for that. We're going to crack on into 2021 now. And as 2021 started, it's not looking all that much better in terms of it is in terms of a vaccine and all that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but in terms of a return to work as we know it, it's not looking all that positive right now, is it?
No, I'm focusing all my efforts on 2022 because I think even if the vaccine comes out for kind of March, April, it's still going to be a few. Like me and you, don't just jump back into work the minute they open the doors. It's
That's
it's
it.
3 months of preparation for an event, and people are gonna. It's gonna take time for people to get back into the scheme of things before they think about booking events and all of that stuff. So I'm just thinking 2022. I'd rather come back big and better and good and all of that stuff than kind of wobble my way through the end of 2021.
Yeah, that's a good thing as well. And if you look at the whole online side of things, it was quite refreshing to me when we started talking that you just said, I tried doing online comedy and magic shows and it just wasn't for me. And I feel a little bit like that with live streaming singing gigs. I mean, it in the first lockdown I had some lovely feedback. I actually grew my fan base a little bit, so it did serve a purpose.
Right.
But as the lockdowns have come in and out again and again, it's not something I've wanted to really push. I feel like there are better ways to spend your time. So I think it's horses for courses, isn't it? It is for some people, and they can transfer what they do online, but some people can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tried it with a few kind of loyal supporters of what I do, and I just didn't enjoy it. And I've got this kind of thing about work that I can't get rid of. That if you're not enjoying it, particularly if you're self-employed, if you're not enjoying it, get out and don't do it. So for me, it was like it's not working. I don't really enjoy it, so I'd much rather give it a break, do something else for a bit, and then come back next year.
And that's something else was Focus Creative. So how did that kind of all come about? Was it an idea that you had prior to the whole pandemic, or did the pandemic lead you to it? How did that all happen?
Well, I've always wanted to do some kind of community membership thing for creators, but I've never been clear about what that looked like. It's kind of been a back burner idea. And then obviously we had lockdown 1, and I kind of drifted through that. Then I realized, man, I've got 3 kids at home. I need a way to escape. So I I thought, well, let's plan something. And so I came up with this idea. I kind of thought it through, and then about kind of it was moving into October time, I think. So I've got a limited company. The flexi furlough thing came in, so that enabled me a bit of time, a couple of days a week, just to think about what we could do. And so I began to put together this kind of focused creative idea and launch it. And it's just all it is gathering creatives, right from voiceover artists to musicians to magicians to authors to content creators, videographers, photographers, whatever it is. If you are pursuing some kind of creative dream of some nature, or if you're an self-employed creative of some nature, then it's just a community that helps you to achieve your most ambitious goals. And we do that, as you know, through using a little framework, a really simple framework that I used back when I was kind of plotting my comedy and magic career, that just helps us to figure out our daily tasks. I've always been fascinated, as I've grown my comedy magic thing. I've always been fascinated by goal setting and productivity, and bringing them together. And so it's based on that, really. And it's been amazing. I mean, I never really knew what it would turn out to be. I was prepared for maybe 3 people to sign up, and it just be a little tiny thing. But actually, as it's grown, I've noticed that creatives are looking for 3 things, and that is clarity on what they're meant to be doing and how they can move forward, confidence in what they do. I've been amazed at how many creatives struggle with a lack of confidence, even those like me and you in the arts, who people would assume are confident people.
Yeah, that's a big assumption.
When it comes to putting it out there, there's a lack of confidence. And then community. We all work alone. Many of us work alone, and yet there's nothing better for creativity than connecting with other people.
Absolutely. We were saying that before we came on air, weren't we? That sometimes working with other people. The 2 examples of that I could think for me were teaming up with 2 other songwriters, like I was talking about, and also working with you, really, in terms of that Voxer support the other day, because that was having that idea with the schools was a bit of a game changer for me. And I know when I go back, that's something I can implement. It's going to help me in so many ways. Here's a question for you. It might be quite a difficult one to answer. Obviously, the whole thing about Focus Creative is that framework. Do you think that's a reason that a lot of creatives lack focus, or do you think it's part of being creative that you can, by the very nature of it and the way your brain works, you can end up being a bit scatty? I know I can. What do you think it is behind the lack of focus in a lot of creatives? And I don't mean that in a bad way to them. But it is.
Yeah. I think the problem is the myth around creativity. Like, you've heard the phrase "starving artist." You've heard the phrase. There's all these kind of phrases and assumptions that creativity, any creative work or job, is risky, and it's all luck and fate. You have to be spotted by the big name. You have to get signed up by Simon Cowell. You have to, and so therefore I think it's a limiting belief. A lot of us go, well, it's unlikely that I'm going to make it famous, and so therefore my dream of doing theatres is off the chart, and there's no chance of it happening. So kind of written off. And therefore, I think if creatives then fill their time with lots of things, rather than kind of focusing in on how do I solve the problem that's stopping me from getting to where I want to be, I fully believe that I can do theatres, that I could fill theatres without being on TV every week. It's just a case, I think everything's figure outable effectively. And so, sure, I mean, if someone signs me up and I get a slot on the Royal Variety, then boom, I'd love it. But I met a guy at a gig a couple of years ago who had a slot on the Royal Variety show, and now he's still doing kids' parties, and he doesn't want to do kids' parties. So there's no guarantee with any creative stuff, but that shouldn't hold us back in many ways. And I think the challenge is, because it's a wobbly road, because it's always a difficult road, because we don't really know how else to do it. Many creatives don't really know how else to achieve their dream but through the difficult route, as in being spotted by Simon Cowell. Hence why everyone goes on Britain's Got Talent, which I'm not condemning particularly, but that's why you see the floods of people going, because they think that's the only route to the dream. Whereas I think, because we have a lack of clarity on how we get to where we want to go, perhaps even a lack of clarity on where we want to go with our work, whatever that might be, we try and fill it with all these ideas. And I'm like this as well. Fill it with 101 ideas, and then realize, wait, where am I going with all this? I'm doing this. I'm doing a podcast. Unless they're all driving you towards where you want to go, you're just filling time.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying that to me the other day. Is that it's good to have other goals, but they should in some way feed in to your main goal, your dream. And I couldn't have put it better myself about. It really frustrates me when you see. I've got into that's how bad lockdown's got. Is I've got into watching The Voice every Saturday night. I actually look forward to it, and but actually I say that like sort of a bit disparagingly, but watching it, I actually of the past couple of weeks I've seen a couple of people on there that I know, fellow singers, that and I know them, but they're not close friends, but I know them. I've gigged with them and stuff, and seeing them come on there and actually. It was really nice to see because I know they've worked at their craft for years and years and years. They've self-funded albums, they've toured, and it was quite interesting to see that they would go on there because a couple of them, one of them in particular, I thought you're the last person I thought would go on something like this. Do you know what I mean? I did, but like you say, you're not particularly condemning that route. There's nothing wrong with that, but some of the other singers on there that I didn't know, they were saying things like, well, I'm doing this because I want to make a living off my music. And I'm thinking, you can make a living off your music without going on something like The Voice. Why do you have to go on that?
Sure. So I've had friends that have been on Britain's Got Talent, and but and these are kind of wise friends who know what they're doing, but they've built a career doing their thing already. They're not going on there to build a career. They're going on there to create. It's a bit of a PR stunt, I guess, in many ways.
Yeah.
And they're very aware that ultimately those things are TV shows. They're not a competition. Ultimately, they're not a competition. It's about a TV show. It's about that in itself being entertainment to the public. So hence why it's a bit of a risk that you can be mocked and pulled apart and edited and framed in all kinds of ways, because ultimately it's not about you, it's about the TV show. And so, but these people that I know that have gone on there that I consider wise, a lot of them are mentors and heroes of mine, are people that have built a career already, a steady, solid career at doing what they do. And it's not for them, it's not about the big kind of making a living off of it. For them, it's about the next level of opportunity that it could provide and the reach and audience that might bring. So, and that's how it should be used, I think, not to build a career.
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, it's in terms of the career side of it. Most of the people I get on this podcast, I try and get people who are like-minded, like myself, and they have the attitude that I know this is my attitude. I want to be able to tour around the UK, and well, that's another issue. I was going to say across Europe, but that might be a bit more difficult now. But anyway, I know that's a huge rabbit hole that we often go into on this podcast, but maybe not today. But I'd like to be able to tour around the UK and other places abroad, and always be able to pull kind of 200 to 250 people, that kind of number, minimum. Some places will be more, but that kind of thing, or even 150 in certain places. There'll be small shows and much bigger shows. And I know bands that do that. I know solo artists that do that. Are they multimillionaires? No, they're not. But do they have a nice life? Do they provide well for their family? Do they love what they do? And is it sustainable? Yeah, it's a really secure, sustainable career. And I think that's all kind of covered up a little bit. I don't think people, especially when they start off on creative endeavours, I don't think they're aware of that level. They think you've either got to be, if you're talking singers, you've either got to be Lady Gaga or you're going to be down the bottom struggling and you can't afford to eat. There's so much in between, and I think there needs to be more awareness of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's, as I said, everything I think is figure outable, and there's creative ways of doing it. There's creative ways of building an audience. There's creative ways of getting the opportunities that you want and that you see your heroes and influencers have. There's creative ways of getting better at what you do. There's creative ways of making money, that you can build a career of doing it.
How important do you think, talking of money and revenue, how important do you think the multiple income streams is for creatives these days?
Oh, really important. For me, I'm not particularly a money-driven person. In fact, as I reflect, one of my errors, I think, of the past few years, I haven't focused enough on that element of things. But actually, what for me the drive is, I want to build this kind of vision, the touring of theatres, all of that stuff. I want to build that, but that's going to require a financial investment, a time investment. And so for me, obviously, I want to provide for my family well as well. All of that is taken into account. But for me, the drive to make money from the art is both about providing for family and doing all that well, but also uh, to kind of fund the vision and resource this vision. So it's for me, it's not a job, is it? It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the kind of things that you advocate a lot is getting in touch with people you consider your heroes, or and spending time with those who are really have really made it in the game that you're in. So Milton Jones being an example for you. How do you go about that? Now you've got a relationship with Milton, but how do you go about making that initial thing for people listening who might want to do that?
So I think it's a bit of a numbers game, and I think it's you're never guaranteed a yes, but it's always worth a try, because if you do get a yes, it's an absolute gold dust.
Mm.
So I mean, with Milton, it was an absolute by chance. I'll tell you a story. I actually emailed his management probably 6 months, 8 months before I got the opportunity, and they turned me away and said, "No, Milton hasn't got the time." That's their job. At the end of the day, their job is
Mm.
to protect him and his time and everything else. That is their job. So fully respect to that. It was October 2018, I think it was, where I was actually on holiday with my family, and I realised that I always knew that me and Milton had some kind of mutual connections, because in the comedy world, if you make enough connections, if you do enough gigs, you build the connections that you become friends. People who have friends, and
Mm.
somewhere along the line, I knew that I had connections, and I realised that for some reason, I don't know why, but for some reason he'd followed me on Twitter, and I never knew that. Um, and when I realised this, I thought, well, I'll just see, and I'll just send him a little message, because obviously when someone follows you and you follow back, you can send a little just send a little message. And this happened not just with Milton, but with Joe Pasquale as well. Do you remember Joe?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
Joe is an absolute child hero of mine. He was one of the first comedians I ever really saw and watched. Um, I've loved Joe Pasquale for years and
Mm.
years. Anyway, same happened with him. Happened to notice that he followed me. I don't know why. I don't know when. Just happened to follow me, probably through some mutual connections. And so I just sent them both a message saying, "Hey, listen, I know you're super busy. You probably won't even read this, but I just wondered if I could come and meet you somewhere for a coffee, 45 minutes of your time. I'll come to you. I just want to learn from you." And both of them were gracious enough and kind enough to say yes. And so with Milton, I went up to Twickenham, met just for a coffee in a coffee shop, and Joe was in Panto in Nottingham, and I had some gigs up in Lincoln near the time that I met with Joe, and so I travelled over to Nottingham, met him in the dressing room of the Nottingham Panto, uh, and I just went with questions. I went planned, and I just went to soak it all up as much as I possibly could. Gareth, can I tell a little story?
Of course you can. Yeah, that's what you're here for.
The other guy that I was privileged to spend time with, and this was a game changer, but it wasn't a very comfortable experience. This was before Joe and Milton. This was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. I had the opportunity to meet with Jeffrey Durham. Now, I don't know if you know Jeffrey Durham, but he was known as the Great Soprendo back in his day. Quite big name on TV, magician, Great Soprendo. I think he was on kids' TV, but he was also in the comedy world, right?
Yeah.
He was married to Victoria Wood, if you remember that. So
Yes, that's where.
her,
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean now. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so Jeffrey Durham, it doesn't do magic anymore. He finished his career on TV. Actually, he made a big reveal on TV, and that was the end of performance for him. It was a very intentional decision, and so he hasn't been on TV for years. He hasn't toured for years, but he was offering some kind of direction to magicians. So I applied, and he said, right, well, let's come for an initial chat. And I went up to London. I spent 2 hours in a restaurant with him, and I tell you, he'd watched a video of my act, and he just tore it apart. Literally, the whole 2 hours, he literally tore it apart, brutally as well. And that's not. I'm not. He was a lovely guy. This is all done in respect ways, but absolutely just. I'll just say at the end of the session, our time together, he said, "Tom, I hope you're okay. I'll give you a call. I'll give you a call later in the week just to check that you're okay." but I was so thankful for that, because I was making a living out of comedy and magic at that point. So it's very easy when you make a living just to sail and to kind of coast your way through. the game-changing side of that coffee meeting or that kind of lunch meeting was that he pointed me in a new direction. He sharpened me up, and he only works with people that are full-time. He says, I only work with people who kind of rely on their bread and butter to make a living, because that's the only way you're going to give the commitment to be good.
Mm.
And so, but I came away. Sure, in the initial instance, I felt a bit deflated because I was hoping to meet one of my heroes, and I was hoping for a nice little encouragement, and instead I walked away battered. but it changed the game. I looked at new, different ways of doing what I was doing. I ditched some stuff, I recreated some stuff, and for the better. And so it was an absolute win for me in terms of quality and improving what I do.
Yeah, I can imagine it. That's absolutely huge, and I've got a couple of similar experiences where where it's not all that comfortable at the time, but actually you go away thinking, I really needed that, and when you're doing your show later down the line, and you put into place some of the things that somebody like him has said. You look back and you think, why the hell did I do it like I used to do it? It's a real kind of
Sure.
like moment where you think, oh my God, So it's interesting. He only works with people who are full time as well, and I think one of the things I like about everybody in the Focus Creative community is that they're all people who. Most of them make their living off what they do, don't they? It's their sole thing. The
Yeah,
majority do.
but not all. Not
Yeah.
all. Some are kind of aspiring to.
Yeah, or they're either, but they've got the mindset that they want to, even if they're not doing it right now.
Yeah.
And I like that, but they're also the sort of people who have a vision and are following a bit of a dream and have got goals. And I know I can only really authoritatively speak from the musician point of view, but there's a lot of musicians who, yes, make a living off it, a reasonable living as well. And they provide for the families well and things like that. But they're very much in the mode of chasing the dollar. One of my friends who doesn't do it for a living actually said to me, well, you've got to be careful not getting into chasing the dollar. And you end up doing, in the case of musicians, you end up doing gigs that you don't really want to do. And over time, that can really drain you. The worst feeling for me is that you're just doing it for the money. That's worse than not getting paid. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's a killer. It's a killer of creativity because you're focused on the wrong thing. Having said that, creatives, I've noticed it just doing focused creative. Sometimes we're so much that end that we forget that we've got to make money as well.
Yeah.
And so it's a tough balance, I think, for creatives, because it's not the drive, but it's also a necessity and a practicality. And particularly if you're trying to grow something, not only do you need to pay yourself so that you can have the time to invest, but you need to invest in the actual thing itself. So, and I know things like you making an album isn't cheap, but it's a necessity if you're going to be a musician.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And it's not take the album I'm in the process of finishing at the minute. I'm like so close to the finishing line, I can almost smell it, sort of thing. But that's been, at this stage, what I'm feeling is that not the financial drain, although it has been a financial drain. I'm feeling the kind of mental and emotional drain as well. I think that gets underestimated a lot of the time, doesn't it?
Sure. Just yesterday, actually, within the Focus Creative, I shared something with the guys. Just well-being. Again, I'm passionate about well-being. It's a side thing. It's not particularly connected with part of Focus Creative, but at this time, I just felt it was important to share some ideas to boost well-being at this time for creatives, because the creative world has been hit badly. Whether you've lost income or whether you've just not had opportunity to create that you would normally, it's been hit massively.
I think in the music world, certainly. I don't know if there's an equivalent of this in your world, but it depends what kind of person you are. Because you look at certain musicians and songwriters in particular. Like, I've got friends who are not all that fussed about performing. They enjoy it when they're up there, but if they don't do it, they're not that bothered. And they could sit all day in a room like this in a studio and create songs, just ideas.
Yeah.
And they love it. They get a buzz out of it and they're excited. Now, that kind of excitement and positivity I only get when I'm walking on stage. Not to say I don't enjoy myself in the studio, I do, but I do a couple of hours and I think, well, I've had enough now. Do you know what I mean? So if you're inherently, I guess you are as well, inherently a performer, this time has been really, really tough, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's me all over. I had full intention when COVID first began, I was going to carry on rehearsing and carry on writing. And even
Mm.
now, I come back to moments where I go, right, I've got an opportunity. I could write a joke every day, and by the end of next year, I'd have like 352 amazing gags, and my act would be storming. And then we're halfway through, and I'm going, oh man, I haven't written one yet. So because the kind of energy in the room just isn't there, and so it's harder to rehearse, it's harder to write, it's harder to do what I do, and that's why I don't enjoy the online thing, because the engagement, the atmosphere, just it's not the same.
And also, what do you think on the online stuff? What do you think in terms of the monetization side of it? Because my summary on it has really been, if you're a big name and you don't really need the money, you'll probably make money doing something online. You've probably got a big
Yeah,
enough following that people will go through the paywall without even thinking. But if you're anything lower than that, well, it might be if you're a band or a performer of some sort, and you've got a really loyal, loving following, they might support you through it. But I think it's a very tough one to monetize, and you get to the point where you think, okay, I'm not making any money out of this. Not that it's all about money, but if I was loving it and enjoying it, the money wouldn't matter. But I'm not loving and
yeah,
enjoying it either.
yeah.
So what am I doing it for? You know.
Yeah, and the thing about that is that I think that, and I love this. Whenever disaster strikes, whenever something in the world goes wrong, whenever the arts comes to the forefront, and I love that. I
Yeah.
just think that's amazing. Free concerts are put on. When the Manchester bombing thing happened, big concert put on, amazing. Uh, Lots of live stream during COVID, and it's all free. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I'm not belittling that in any way whatsoever. However, the problem is that it just feeds this idea that the creativity doesn't really have a value, and we've seen a huge conversation around that politically, but also just generally about creativity having value, and people, uh, people pay everyone else, but if you employ a plumber, you'll pay them, but if you want to watch a musician, you'll question whether they need paying or not.
Mm.
Maybe you walk past the busker or whatever it is, and so it's a difficult one. I love the fact that the arts comes to the forefront, and I'm all for it, like 100%. At the same time, I want to. Part of the mission of Focus Creative is to try and raise up this kind of movement of valuing creativity and people, engaging with creativity because they want to. And I think, again, when you're not famous, it's hard. It's harder to get money it's harder to kind of put something online and ask people for money. But at the same time, if the value for creativity was there, I think people would jump at it.
And you know what? Without going down the European rabbit hole, that in Europe, that's something that, and further afield, I've played in Japan and other places, and they appreciate their creative people and their performers, and in our case, musicians, so much. They look after you really well. In France, the government pay musicians a wage. And
Right.
it's a small wage. I think last time I sort of read about it, it was kind of 10,000 euros a year, something like that. But and
Yeah.
for that you have to do a government related performance every month. So it could be at the town hall or something. You have to do. There's a contractual obligation within that small one. But still, I
Might be
mean,
moving to no, France. Where is it? Where was it?
that's France. That's France. That
France. I
set
might
up.
move to France. That
Yeah.
sounds like an easy life. That does.
Exactly. Yeah. But you can do your own gigs on there as well. Now there's obviously you get taxed more in France and things like that. But you look at around the world. When I toured Germany, you look at how they look after you at venues, and how responsive the crowds are, and live music it is really really valued in those places. I'm sure other entertainment forms are as well.
Sure.
I think we've got a way to go with that mindset in the UK, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah, it's a difficult one because at the beginning of COVID, I kind of understood that the arts isn't, and I still believe this. The arts isn't kind of as essential as NHS workers or anything like that. So it's never going to be the same rung, and I'm fine with that. I guess what I'm saying, not maybe not even from a political perspective, but from a just general culture perspective, let's raise the value of the arts and value the effort that people like you put in to deliver a show. It's not just a case of turning up and having a little sing song. There's
Mm.
hours and hours of work go into that, and there's teams and teams and teams of freelancers that you would never know and you would never see, all investing to make it happen. And that's why ticket money is important, and that's why buying tickets when you see an artist, and that's why I think we should support lower artists. When I say lower artists, that's not to discredit, but people like me and you who aren't big names, but they're at the local theatre, maybe in the studio theatre doing 50 seats. They're not earning a packet at all from that gig, but they're out there doing it. So my encouragement to people is go and watch them, go see them. If they're rubbish, hey, you've had a reasonably good night out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think there's like you say, in those little community theatres, there's a big support kind of thing from the community. But there's also those people who you're doing a gig locally with a good band, and it's £10 a ticket, and they're going, I don't know, but they'll happily go and stand in an arena with their phone trying to film, watching the gig on the screen, and they'll pay 60, 70 quid for the privilege, and
Absolutely.
So.
And there are some incredible artists, both in comedy and music. There are some incredible artists out there that you will never hear of, and they will always be incredible, and yet they will always be unknown. And so it's always worth going to see.
Absolutely. So with the Focus Creative, then, Tom, just tell us, or the listeners, where it can all be found. You've got your podcast as well, so just talk us through the kind of setup and what people can expect if they look into it.
Sure. So you can head over to focusedcreative.co.uk. Find me on Instagram at focusedcreative. And if you send me a DM, you can come along just for a taster to one of our community calls, which is kind of the main kind of value from Focus Creative. The big takeaway from the community is our calls on a Monday. So we have one at 9:15, one at 7:30 p.m. Come along if you're a creative, see what it's like. If it's for you, you can then sign up. But you can come along for free just to see what it's like. All you need to do is send me a little DM on Instagram or email me at info@focuscreative.co.uk. And then, the podcast is called Get On With It. So if you type that in Apple iTunes or Spotify, Get On With It, and maybe you might need to type in Focus Creative as well. You'll find it. It's just 5-minute episodes, literally 3-minute, 5-minute, 7-minute podcasts. Just giving you a little boost of encouragement, a little boost of inspiration, and maybe a little bit of nugget of wisdom here and there about how to pursue and move forward and make traction on your creative dream.
Yeah, I can vouch for all the things you just said. The podcast has been a nice boost for me during these times. When I'm sure you've had it when motivation is like rock bottom some days and really high others. Sometimes you need just those little pick me ups. So that's great. And the same with the community call as well. That's kind of a big thing about that. Apart from all the other benefits of meeting like-minded people and sort of holding each other accountable is a big part of it. And kind of checking in on each other, which I think is important. It's just made me get up on a Monday morning as well, because Mondays are usually my slouchy, lazy day, and don't get me wrong, when I first wake up, I think, oh man, I could easily go back to sleep, but it forces me to get up and going, and then after the call, it's that those next few hours are always a really productive time, and I think I speak for most performers when I say that Monday isn't usually the hottest day.
No, especially at 9:15, the call that you come on.
Exactly.
You've had a gig tonight. I mean, that's not been the case yet, but let's wait and see when you're gigging on a Sunday night and you get home at 2 a.m. And whether you still come to the 9:15 call.
I'll be texting you saying I'll see you at 7:30, Tom. I'm not doing 9:15.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure. I wanted to get you on for a while, so really enjoyed that. Thank you.
No, my pleasure, Gareth. Thanks ever so much.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Tom Elliott. I think you'll agree, lovely guy, really doing some great things for creative people. Great initiative, Focused Creative is. I really do suggest you check that out if you're a creative person and you're looking for that kind of clarity and focus. It's a great framework that really does help in a really nice community as well. Before we go into the usual kind of outro spiel, is what I call it, I want to just read out some reviews. Now, I do apologise. Some of these have come in a long time ago, and I've only just discovered them because I'm not the best with technology and accounts on websites and signing up to things and all that kind of thing. A long, boring story, but I'm not that great with that. And I'm also quite new to the podcast world still. So do bear with me on that. The other thing I wanted to say was, as I was listening to that interview, you can hear faintly in the background, at least in part of it, my washing machine behind me. It's not directly behind me. It's outside the studio, but it's the only thing, that and next door's dog are the only things that come through the soundproofing, the excellent soundproofing soundproofing I've got in here. So I do apologise if that was rumbling away. I hope it didn't bother you too much. But onto the reviews quickly before we finish. I've got one here from Ms. Berg in the United States, and she says, interesting show, and giving it a 4-star review. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. I've got one here from AliCat72 who says, an interesting perspective on life on the entertainment road. Really enjoyed listening to this collection of interviews, a collection of interesting people whose careers have spanned decades in the entertainment industry. With a pleasant natural rapport, they meander and discuss the highs and lows of life on the road and working with the entertainment industry in general. Thank you very much for that. It's a really nice detailed review. I like those ones. And we've got Nick the Mod. I think I know who Nick the Mod is. But it says, what a great podcast with some great insight and antidotes from both Gareth and his guest Spike. So this was a review of the very first episode. So it tells you how long ago that was. A great way to start the series, and I'm looking forward to hearing more episodes. Cheers, Nick. Appreciate that and hope you're well. I've got a much more recent one here from Tony Locksmith, who says, tremendo. Fantastic interview, great insight into John Terrell, the man, his thoughts and passions. Brilliant to hear an interviewer who is as passionate about his music as the interviewee. Superb. Hey, thanks a lot, Tony. I really do appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed the episode. I know you got in touch on Facebook as well, so I do appreciate that. I've got one here from Ireland, from Marty G28IRE. That's obviously, it stands for Ireland, I think. It says, great way to spend an hour. Great flow to the podcast. Really interesting and insightful. Keep them coming. I certainly will. Thank you very much, Marty. Appreciate that. Hope you're enjoying the episode since then as well. And they're just a few of the reviews that we've had in since. We've had a lot of 4 and 5 star ratings, which means the world to me. It really does. And I've got a treat for you for your 30th episode of the show next week. It's a really, really good guest. One that I think previous listeners of some of the higher ranked episodes in terms of listens will really enjoy. Let's put it that way. A big thank you to Tom Elliott for his time. Really appreciate that, Tom. It was great to catch up on a few things, and I look forward to working with you going forward. Now, to play out the show, I'm going to give you a sneak peek of my next single, which is the title track for my next album, which is nearly complete. The album is. The single I'm really, really proud of. It's about the kind of situation we're in at the minute, especially creative people, which I thought is why it'd be good for this episode. It's called The Other Side. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Will I see you at the end? Will it be the same as the way that things were? Will it be a lucky turn? It's been shit, but now we're just about to learn. Certain anger, a premonition. We just had to work with all the things we've got. We're so fearful, another dimension. Well, just stay at home and learn yourself to love. It's hard to believe this isn't the worst, but time will heal. Death isn't a first. We gotta put up a fight, not accept defeat. Please just show us that you care. See you on the other side. See you on the other side. A new condition with no distinction, but it's not the end of what we know and love. What's the answer? What will be, will be. We've just had to reap the seeds of what they've sown. We don't want to go back, gotta face the fear, but time will head to the other side. The point of no return, and the end is near. Let's stick together and we'll show our worth. I could not go on, it all fell apart, but we'll all come together. I knew from the start, we gotta keep our heads